Welcome back to the Crash Course podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B. Scott. Well, we all had to witness it on Thursday, the calamity that was the Colts game. We're going to talk about the Indianapolis Colts today, what they should do, their future looking forward, as they will have 10 days to get geared up for two very important games. I think the season itself kind of rests on these next couple of weeks as they take on the Jaguars and the Titans. We're going to kind of reflect on the game on Thursday as well as look at the future. And B. Scott, we talked about it. It's been a minute since we've done a podcast together. I'm glad that the Purdue Boilermakers have kind of turned it around after a slow start. Now we're playing a little bit better. But hey, how have you been doing? What's been going on in your world?
Oh, I've been good. Been busy, just working and raising two crazy kids, and this the normal stuff. But yeah, I'm excited about the Boilers being able to turn it around and being tied for first in the West Division with a slate of winnable games staring them down. I'm very happy, but not as happy with the Colts. And honestly, I feel really bad from Thursday night. I feel really bad for Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit because that was like the worst game possible to call, and Al Michaels just let it be known. He was not like shy about how bad this game was, and I can't believe I actually watched the entire thing myself.
Right? Yeah. It's one of those things where like you kind of look, you're a guy who like Al Michaels. You've broadcasted, the Miracle on Ice. You've broadcasted Monday Night Football forever, and so
the Super Bowl.
And on one hand you're like, oh, maybe you shouldn't say some of that stuff as a broadcaster, but look, I'm glad he did. I mean, there was no sugarcoating how bad the football was on Thursday night. And I mean, the sad part is you've got the Commanders and the Bears coming up, so there's a chance it's as ugly, but it's going to be tough to beat how ugly that Colts game was on Thursday night.
I mean, hey, he's allowed to say it because he can.
Right.
One, he's got the credibility to be able to say those types of things. But two, he was only saying what everybody else was thinking and tweeting at the time. Honestly, I probably felt more sorry for Kirk Herbstreit because all he was doing is sitting there watching his watch and going, when can I get on the plane to Kansas for college game day this weekend? I just want to get out of here. Like, this isn't worth my time.
Yeah, definitely one of those weeks where he's like, I think I'm just gonna skip ahead to the college football slate. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive in. I mean, it was an ugly game on Thursday night. You had the first quarter. I mean, you could kind of tell it was gonna be a rough night with how it started. Literally, first play of the game for the Colts, Nyheim Hines. Actually, no, it was on third down. Nyheim Hines leaves after a hit to the head on third down. It was a 3-0 lead for the Broncos after the first quarter. In the second quarter, the Colts are driving for the first time all game. That is until Matt Ryan throws a pick. It's 6-3 Broncos at halftime. It's an absolute punt fest. The third quarter, each team adds a field goal. In the fourth quarter, kind of an odd sequence of events as the Broncos are driving to potentially kick another field goal or at least wind the clock down, to nearly the end of the game. The Broncos elect to pass, and Stephon Gilmore intercepts Russell Wilson in the end zone with 2:14 to play. Indy was out of timeouts, so like the Broncos literally. I don't know exactly how the time worked out. There may have been a situation where they would have had to give the ball back at some point to the Colts, but they could have at least made it a 6-point game, in which in this particular instance would probably have been an insurmountable lead with how neither team was able to even get in the end zone. Chase McLaughlin is able to connect on a 31-yard field goal with 5 seconds left. That sends the game to overtime and sends some Broncos fans to the exits early because they're like, you know what? I actually don't want to admit tomorrow at work that I'm tired.
I'd rather get some sleep tonight.
I'd rather get some sleep before work. It's going to be a little bit more embarrassing if I go into the office like, I'm really tired today. I sat through the entirety of the Broncos.
No, let's be honest. What it was, they're like, man, they stopped selling beer after the end of the third quarter. I don't think I can handle another 5 more minutes of this without a fresh beer.
Right.
Nope. I'm out.
I cannot be sober for the remainder of this game. Yeah, McLaughlin, first drive of overtime, is able to hit a 48-yarder to give the Colts their first lead of the game. Denver drives all the way down to the Colts 6-yard line. The Broncos elect to go for it, aside from kicking it, which honestly at that point I was kind of rooting for the Colts to have 2 ties on the season. That would be pretty interesting.
Has that ever happened? A team like in modern football?
Probably not
where a
modern.
team has had 2 ties in a season, or 2 ties in the beginning of the season.
I want probably as far as this early in the season, it's probably a little bit more unprecedented. I want to say there was like a Bengals team that a couple years ago had 2 ties, but I could be mistaken on that. But yeah, it definitely is something very unique that could have potentially happened. But they decide to go for it. Russell Wilson doesn't see a wide open KJ Hamler. Instead, he throws it into traffic. The pass falls incomplete, and the Colts. I kind of chuckled to myself when I typed this out. The Colts earned the victory. They did technically earn the victory, but
defense did earn it. The defense earned it.
Yeah. Looking at some of the stats, Matt Ryan went 26 for 41 with 251 yards and 2 picks. Deion Jackson actually was a pretty good bright spot, 13 rushes for 62 yards in relief. Of all the talk about, it's a revenge game for Philip Lindsay, he didn't have the greatest of games. Alec Pierce, though, 8 catches for 81 yards. He's starting to blossom a little bit. And so before we get into the meat and potatoes here, talking about the Colts, I did, because this podcast is probably going to be a little bit more on the negative side with talking about the Colts. So I wanted to start off with at least something positive to take out of the first 5 games of the season. And honestly, I do think we talked a lot about the weapons for Matt Ryan at the beginning of the year, and I do think they are starting to come around after a rough week 1. After dropping his only 2 targets against the Texans, Alec Pierce has caught 15 of 20 passes he's been targeted on for 222 yards. Still looking for his first touchdown, but and the tight ends have been really reliable. You have 2 touchdowns for Jelani Woods against the Chiefs, 2 touchdowns for Mo Alley Cox. Yeah. He's
going to be really good.
2 touchdowns for Mo Alley Cox against the Titans. Kylan Granson has been a reliable target. Are they the caliber weapons that we would like the Colts to have? Absolutely not, but they are starting to come around, and you wonder how much more they would be coming around if it weren't for the ineptitude right now at quarterback.
See, I don't even know if it's the ineptitude at quarterback. Honestly, he doesn't have much chemistry with them yet. And that's coming around, obviously, and we're seeing these players come around. But honestly, I put a lot more of it onto the offensive line. The offensive line is not giving him any time to even be able to step up into the pocket to allow a receiver to get open. I think as he builds a little bit more chemistry with these wide receivers, maybe that will improve. But some of the decisions, they're not Carson Wentz-esque decisions, but he does have butterfingers. When he gets hit, he tends to drop the ball a lot. I don't know. Again, that comes on to the offensive line. When I look at this team, though, I want to say the defense is a bright spot right now at this point. Yeah, I know they gave up 31 to the Titans a week after shutting down the Chiefs offense, but yet they shut down the Chiefs offense. They made this past Thursday night. They actually kept the team in the game. How many times did Denver just drive deep into Colts territory and then get turned away? Either they had to settle for a field goal, or they ended up getting backed up and had to punt, or a turnover, anything like that. So this defense is showing its resiliency. And it's a bend but don't break style. I know a bend but don't break style is really frustrating, but it works. It does work if you have the right pieces in play. So that's a positive for me. The other positive is that this team, at least on the surface or when you see them out on the field, they haven't given up. They could have just said, "Man, we're just not here tonight. This game, we're done. Like, whatever, our offense can't move the ball. We can't do anything. We're down offensive linemen. We don't have Jonathan Taylor, whatever." Or when they fell behind against the Texans early in the season in game 1. They battled back. Yeah, they probably should have won that game, and I think replaying that game today, I think they would win that game, obviously, with Chase McLaughlin at kicker. I mean, there's your positive. There's your biggest positive. They made the right move by getting rid of Rodrigo Blankenship and bringing in Chase McLaughlin. I'm sorry that I mean he's been obviously he made that clutch kick with about 5 seconds left in this game to send the game to overtime. That's to me, Rodrigo does not make that kick. He does not hit that one. So there's another positive. There are positives if you look at it, and I guess also if you spin some of the stuff that like the defense played well. Yeah, they've played well in 2 games, but it's getting there. Remember, this is a new coordinator. There's a lot of new pieces. It's going to come together. I'm going to have a little bit more faith than a lot of people. That doesn't mean I don't want to see change, especially in the offseason. I think there needs to be change, but I'm going to look at the positives right now and believe that this thing can get righted. There are the pieces there to right the ship. I think. I hope.
Yeah, I mean, there are definite things that can improve, and definite things that this team, I think, can play better. And that's kind of going into we're going to do kind of 2 different hot and cold segments. We're going to do a main one here after we talk about our friends of the show. But first, before kind of like one last bit one last, talking point about the past before we kind of look ahead a little bit. Hot or cold, the Colts season has been a disappointment. And I'm actually going to say no. I didn't know if I, would go contrarian on this one or not, because at the end of the day, it is about the wins and losses, and the Colts are about where we thought they would be win total wise, or at least where I thought, they would be win total wise.
They just got a different way to get there.
Exactly. I mean, my prediction at the beginning of the year was that they would beat Houston and Tennessee they would beat Houston, Tennessee at home, but lose to Jacksonville, Kansas City, and Denver. That would put them at 2-3. So technically, at 2-1, they're better than what I thought they would be at the beginning of the year. And I mean, there is a universe where they could have looked good the first 5 weeks of the season and still been 2-3. I mean, they could have looked amazing. They played amazing against the Chiefs, but they still technically could have lost that game. Jacksonville has looked better than expected. So that loss doesn't look near. No, I mean, they did get shut out 24-0, but it doesn't look as bad as it did, a couple of weeks ago. The playoff loss against the Bengals has made people forget that Tennessee was the AFC 1 seed last year. So, I mean, the Colts have lost. The Colts losses aren't terrible losses. The tie is the worst game right now on there as far as like, wins and losses goes. I mean, you would love to have
exactly.
that. You'd love to have that, because I think there's even a little bit of a different conversation. A 3-2 for the first, 5 weeks of the season looks a lot better than obviously 2-1. So, the Colts now have 10 days to prepare and get right for a 2-week stretch in the division, and we'll find out who they're going to be in those 2 weeks. But I think so far, I'm not ready to call it a disappointing year, but obviously in 2 weeks, we could be saying a very different thing.
Yeah, I agree. This is a cold take. I don't think it's a disappointment because yes, that like you said, that tie is super frustrating because the win was there to be had, but the Colts made the adjustments necessary that if they had to play that game over again, they would come out on top. And I've already gone over that what that adjustment was. And honestly, I think now if you play that game again, Alec Pierce doesn't drop that easy touchdown in the end zone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, he's a rookie. That was game 1, legitimate game 1. And those types of things are going to happen. Yeah, it happened in a big spot, and then your kicker doesn't show up. That hurts. But like you said, things would look a lot different if there wasn't that tie. This team is easily 3-2 if you have to replay that game. But yes, it's not a disappointment of a season yet. These next few weeks will be very telling. But for me, I guess if I had to pick one word to describe this season so far, it would be frustrating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has been a very frustrating year, just because it's hard to not kind of relive what last season was. I mean, you're fresh off the disappointment of the Colts literally just have to beat Jacksonville and they're in the playoffs last season, and instead, you have a disappointing end of the season, and that's just seemed to carry over into the first 5 weeks of this season.
Right. And look, for some reason, the Colts just cannot play in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Even dating back to the Peyton Manning years. I mean, how many times did the Colts go down to Jacksonville and Maurice Jones-Drew and who was their other?
Fred Taylor.
Fred Taylor just ran roughshod on a team that would go on to win a Super Bowl. Right. I mean, it's like
44-17, whatever that's
exactly. For some reason, there is just this team does not have the ability to go down to Jacksonville and play a good game.
Yeah, and I mean,
so I mean,
we'll get into a little bit.
Surprised about that outcome?
No,
a little bit, but
yeah. I mean, we will get into it a little bit later with Jacksonville, but Jacksonville has just as much trouble at Lucas Oil looking at that stretch. So I mean, they just each team in this series is just taking care of business at home. But we'll get into a little bit more of the future for the Colts moving forward. But first, let's talk about the friends of the show. First of all, Anchor. The Crash Course Podcast is brought to you by Anchor. Looking to start a podcast but don't know where to start? Look no further than Anchor.fm. Anchor allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or mobile device and will distribute it to other sites such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. On a budget, not only is Anchor completely free of charge, but will allow you to make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. Anchor is everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Also, the Crash Course Podcast is brought to you by Eat Lunch and Board Game, heard weekly on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever podcasts can be heard. Board games build bridges. So we talked about the Colts moving forward. Looking ahead at October, they will play Jacksonville at home this coming Sunday, then go on the road to face Tennessee before returning home against the Commanders. So there's a world where you'd like to, there's a world where they could potentially win all three of those games. But the first kind of question here in Hot or Cold we're going to ask is, the Colts should not have traded for Matt Ryan. I look at this. There's a couple of different angles you can play with this. The angle of acquiring Matt Ryan versus the other options at quarterback, and then the angle of pursuing a veteran quarterback versus a younger option and starting to look more at your long-term future of the franchise, which I know we've talked about a couple of times, the fact that Matt Ryan isn't going to be, or we are thinking he's not going to be a 1 or 2 year guy. He's going to be here for maybe 3-4 years and maybe even beyond that. But you still would like to wonder what the long-term future of the franchise looks like. Looking back at the quarterback carousel this offseason, I mean, the Colts were never going to get Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers. Maybe after the win on Thursday, by default, maybe Matt Ryan has been the best of the, quarterback shuffle this year. As far as, Baker's not been good. Deshaun Watson hasn't played. We all know about his off-field issues wouldn't have warranted the Colts to go get him anyway, just because that wouldn't be the kind of guy they would want to bring in. It's not that, it's not that Carson Wentz has looked, phenomenal in Washington. So, maybe by default, you're like, okay, maybe Matt Ryan was the answer after all, as far as who we were going to get in the post-Carson Wentz era. So of the quarterbacks on the table this offseason, yeah, Matt Ryan looks just as good as anyone else. But as far as the quarterback carousel that the Colts themselves have been on, look, Andrew Luck's retirement was unprecedented, and that's something that will set your franchise back years. And as a Jacoby Brissett apologist, I'm not going to go rehash that because I do think that he deserves a little bit more credit than what he got. So I was on board with them, though, bringing in Phillip Rivers. The Colts go 11-5, make the playoffs for the first time since 2014. Rivers throws 24 touchdowns to 11 interceptions with a 97 quarterback rating, which improves on his numbers that he had at the end of his Chargers run. I would say that was a successful experiment. I was on board with that because you didn't really know what to do at the quarterback position. That's 1 year after Luck unexpectedly retires. So I kind of agree with that plan. Then I was also all in on Carson Wentz. It made a lot of sense. He knew Frank Reich's system. He's a young quarterback, so maybe that you can make something of the guy that Philly thought was their franchise QB. And he has one of his better years by his standards: 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, a 94.6 QB rating. But because of how it ends, and because he rubbed some of the folks in the building the wrong way, he's out after 1 year. And I now looking on the third year of a rental Band-Aid quarterback. And I think maybe it should have been done after Carson Wentz didn't work. It should have just been done after that run. I mean, it's a harsh thing to say. I know this year's quarterback class was not it. As far as I'm not saying I'm not out here rooting for Kenny Pickett or clamoring for Desmond Ridder or anything like that, but I think after the Wentz experiment failed, I think that's when the Colts should have looked more towards a longer-term option at quarterback. I mean, Matt Ryan is on pace for 17 touchdowns and 24 interceptions, his worst quarterback rating of his career, and 71 sacks. Now, obviously, all those numbers won't hold up. I don't.
No, he's going to get injured.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. He's only fumbled 10 plus times in a season in 3 other years and had 11 all of last year. He has 11 this season. And it feels like you're playing the results a bit, but to be doing this for a third year in a row, you need to hit a home run with who you bring in at quarterback, and Matt Ryan has been anything but that. So at least looking at it right now, I'm saying it's a hot take. The Colts should not have done that. I think after the Wentz experiment fails, that's when you start looking at, okay, we need to actually look at our long-term guy, and we may not get the next Andrew Luck or Peyton Manning the first time we have to go out and draft somebody, but you just kind of have to kind of get back into that mindset. I know this is a organization that thinks that they can just plug anyone in and we'll be fine, and we're learning that that's absolutely not the case.
So I'm going to actually say this is a cold take, mostly because I don't know even looking at long term, the Colts were not in a position to go after a long term option in the draft. You don't have a first round pick. You're picking middle of the second round. I mean, it's really tough to find that long-term solution when your first pick is that far back. So I think it was the right move because you did need a better veteran presence at quarterback in the locker room, because Carson Wentz was not a locker room guy. And this is the complete total opposite of that. This is a leader. This is a locker room guy. I think that's what you needed. And it was a good move. It was really the only move you could make other than keeping Carson Wentz. But I will be the first to say, if the wheels keep falling off the wagon even more this year, I'm going to say don't go to Nick Foles. Don't, because Nick Foles isn't the solution either. I want to see Sam Ehlinger just to see what we have there. Hey, worst case scenario, you don't think Sam Ehlinger is the future for your franchise, but he performs well. He may be the future for somebody else's franchise. And it may just be able to help you move up in the draft a little bit this next year to get that long term. My worry is with this season is that the ship gets righted a little bit and Matt Ryan just doesn't play well enough to win a bunch of games, but the rest of the team does. Like, Matt Ryan's still looking like he's struggling and everything. We win enough games to be out of the quarterback contest for the guys that are going to be legitimate prospects, and Matt Ryan retires. Then we're dumped right back into the middle of the carousel again, because we don't lose enough, but we don't win enough to be good to keep the quarterback around from retiring. So it feels like there's a perpetual treadmill that this team's on, like the hamster wheel. And it either needs to have the wheels completely fall off for the hamster wheel to come undone and be able to hit the reset button properly. I don't know, because this team is one of those, they're not going to give up. Like I've already said, they're showing resiliency. So it's hard to say what to do in the future, but I think the trading of Matt Ryan was the right thing to do at the time. Because like you said, they weren't getting Russell Wilson, which is showing, thank goodness,
Yeah.
I guess. They weren't getting Aaron Rodgers. Honestly, to me, I feel like the real question should have been, should the Colts have taken Carson Wentz last year? I think they were the front. I think Frank Reich was so set and just lobbied so hard for Carson Wentz that they missed opportunities otherwise. I mean, if the rumors are true and Tom Brady really did want to come to Indianapolis at one point and they ended up going, or actually it goes back to Phillip Rivers.
Yeah.
Actually, they decided to go with Phillip Rivers over Tom Brady. So if the rumors are true and the Colts decided to go with Phillip Rivers over Tom Brady, I think, yeah, that's not a long-term solution, but it at least puts the Colts in a better situation where they can manage things a little bit better. I don't know. It makes them competitive. But then again, all of a sudden, Tom Brady retires, and you won too many games, and now you're out of contention for these higher end prospects. So I don't know. It's a catch-22 in the NFL. Like, do you want to suck for a good quarterback, for a future quarterback, or do you want to be competitive and put a good product on the field consistently? But you can't consistently play well without a long-term solution at quarterback. I don't know. That's why I mean, I don't get paid to figure that stuff out.
Well, see, so like, and that's what I'm like, because I was on board. When the Colts got Phillip Rivers, I understood it from the sense of, okay, go draft someone in maybe the middle rounds, whatever. You don't have to go get the next generational person. Go get someone who can learn, like Jacob Eason when they originally drafted Jacob Eason. Have him learn under Phillip Rivers. And eventually that will be the quarterback of the future. And if he's not, then that's fine. That'll be the year the Colts go 2-14 or now 2-15, and we'll be in the line for the next quarterback to go with. Carson Wentz made sense because it's like, okay, why if we truly believe, if this team and organization truly believes that we're in our window to potentially win a Super Bowl right now, then it makes sense to go out and get a guy who's shown flashes of being able to, literally was in the MVP running in 2017 or 16, whatever year that was before he got hurt. A guy who knows Frank Reich's system from that season. It makes sense to go get that guy, a potential franchise quarterback. When that doesn't happen, that's when I think that they should have, and I know like this offseason, fine. It kind of, take the quarterback where you can, and knowing that there's a chance it helps, whatever, there's a chance it goes well, a chance it doesn't. This organization believes they're in the running for the Super Bowl when they're really far from it. And it's, and it even goes down through, not just the organization, but the fans too are so afraid to be bad for a year that, because we've been so spoiled with Peyton Manning right into Andrew Luck, that this team doesn't remember. I mean, of course, I wasn't alive for the Jeff George years, or maybe I was, but
you were.
This team.
You were very young.
Yes, but I mean, sometimes like it's gonna happen. The Colts are going to be terrible. I mean, we survived the Curtis Painter season. We've survived the Jacoby Brissett year where he got sacked pretty much every play. It felt like, the Colts are so afraid to be bad that that's what's holding this team back. Like, fine, like I am okay with the team being terrible as long as there's a direction. And right now, they're trying so hard to cling to, well, we were supposed to win all these we were supposed to be so good with Andrew Luck, and then he retired. We want to still be good. It's like, right. But you're putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. You're not actually addressing the problem that needs to be addressed. The most important position on the field, you're getting a Band-Aid for, thinking that your system can just will just fit everyone, and it's, you know, just kind of this one size fits all thing that, you know, you can just plug someone in and be good, and that's just clearly not the case. So I think, like, I can make sense of Philip Rivers, I can make sense of Carson Wentz. I'm still hopeful that Matt Ryan will be good. I like Matt Ryan. I don't hate him, but I just think that playing the results and looking at what feels like what we've looked at for 3 years. I mean, people forget first 5 games of the year last year, Carson Wentz threw 7 touchdowns and 1 pick. And Philip Rivers that first season in 2020 threw was 4 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, but still, I mean, so the touchdown numbers weren't there, but he definitely hadn't thrown as many picks. Neither had gotten sacked as many times. We talked about last year, Carson Wentz holding on to the ball a little bit too long. I mean, he still wasn't sacked as much as Matt Ryan's been sacked. So I just think that I'm hopeful that Matt Ryan will be good, but right now it's looking like another failed experiment.
See, but I can understand why the front office at least felt we're in a window now and we need to go get a quarterback that's proven rather than hitting the reset button. Because look, you're coming off a year where your running back was essentially, he was the runner-up for the MVP. He had a record-breaking year. Your defense was only getting better. I mean, and you looked like you were like a few bad decisions from Carson Wentz away from actually being a playoff team. You know, you beat some good teams last year. So it looked like on paper this team was ready, and it just needed that veteran presence at quarterback, somebody that could push them along the way. But I don't think anybody could have really predicted the offensive line turning into a leaky faucet this year. I mean, with the amount of money that has been thrown at that offensive line, with right guard Quentin Nelson, center Ryan Kelly, right tackle Braden Smith, who's now had to move back over to guard, which I think he's better at. But still, there is a ton of money that's been thrown at that offensive line, which has been a very solid offensive line. And honestly, I think the play, I mean, yeah, the retirement of Andrew Luck really hurt, but I think the retirement of Anthony Costanzo has hurt the worst because they have not been able to figure that out. And the fact that Eric Fisher came in and was a bust was an even bigger hit. And the fact, I don't know why they didn't look into fixing that even more this offseason. I don't know. This is going to get us into our next question.
Yeah.
But like the holes that are there, the lack of depth that is there, all comes back to Chris Ballard and him thinking, I got to pay my guys. Right. And he did. He paid his guys that have been playing well, but decided that, you know, we're just going to work with what we have. And I think I sent you an article. I'll talk about it here in a second. Let's move on.
Yeah.
This is going into the next question.
Yeah, so the next hot or cold question is Chris Ballard will survive the season, but not Frank Reich. And I think that's a cold take because I think they're both gone after this season. And maybe even sooner, depending on how these next couple of games go. You know, or at least you'd like to think that if the Colts are truly in their Super Bowl or bust window like their owner seems to say they are all the time. I like Ballard and Reich, but man, I'm just mentally exhausted. I can't do this anymore where we get hyped up every year, get talked about, you know, obviously the organization isn't going to be like, you know what, guys, I think our team's pretty mid. We're going to go 8-8 this season. So be on the lookout for that. I get that part of it. But at the same time, I mean, win now takes risks. And the Colts have simply refused to take risks, and that falls squarely on Ballard. I mean, so much, you know, as much as I love Ballard, I think he has to go. And I think if Ballard goes, it only makes sense to get rid of Reich too, so the new GM can get their guy. Because I mean, to come into the season like, okay, fine, you know, we thought we were a, you know, quarterback away from being good, but why are we not putting other pieces around that quarterback to be good? Why are we going into the season with Michael Pittman and that's pretty much it? You know, with you know, you're taking a bunch of untested rookies, which I mean, like I said, they're all starting to come around a bit. But why did we not go and look at getting some upgrades at the wide receiver position? Why didn't we go? Why didn't we shore up that offensive line to make sure we could protect Matt Ryan? Why are we, if we're saying, okay, why does this team and organization just seem to think like, okay, anything bad that happens, it's the quarterback. The rest of this team is flawless. The quarterback is the only concern. It's like, no, it's not. That's not how this works. You have to put talent around him at wide receiver. You have to, even if it's just to get the pressure off Jonathan Taylor, because I mean, you saw it, you've seen it in games where teams are like just saying like, yeah, fine, we know you, like, beyond running it with Jonathan Taylor, you got nothing. And so it's frustrating that this team every year is like, we're going to be in it, we're going to be in contention, and it just doesn't get reflected on the field. And you mentioned it, the fact that we've thrown a lot of money at that offensive line, and this was kind of Ballard's calling card that like, oh hey, we're going to build in the trenches. Well, guess what? The trenches look like crap right now. And
defensively, I think they look okay.
Yeah. Okay, defensive.
I like our defensive line.
Yeah, defensive line is solid. But as far as the offensive line, I mean, okay, fine. If you're gonna tell me that you're gonna build in the trenches and that's truly like one of the only things that matters, then why does it not look better? Why are we not taking more care of it to make sure that it's better? So Ballard, I think, is great as a talent evaluator. I'm not ready to, I think I will, to this day, will still defend him as a better GM than Ryan Grigson, but it's just I can't do this anymore. Of yeah, we're fine, we're good, we're gonna be okay, and it's like, no, we're not, man. It's been so mediocre for the last couple of years now, and if we're truly in that window, we need to actually be proactive, take some risks, and yeah, fine. If there's egg on your face after a 12-1 season because you went out and signed, OBJ to spice up the wide receiver core and that didn't work out, well then fine, at least you went for it. I can be okay with it as long as you're taking swings. You're gonna miss sometimes. That's why, I mean, I'm a huge Cubs fan. As everybody that listens to the podcast knows, like because Theo Epstein, had some good. He took some swings and he connected on a lot of them, going out and getting Aroldis Chapman, going out and getting John Lester, and he missed on some, getting, Alex Avila and Jose Quintana, who didn't look the greatest in their runs with the Cubs. So, I mean, it's okay once you've built up that equity to take some chances, and they just refuse to do that while at the same time being like, we're fine, we're good. Like, no, it's not been good. It's not been fine through the first, 5 weeks of the season. As far as the plan for the future, I think these next couple of games are crucial. The Colts need to beat the Jags and Titans both. I think if Frank Reich and Chris Ballard are going to make it through this season, the Colts need to be 4-2-1 after week 7. They need to be 4-2-1. If they lose to the Titans or lose to the Jaguars or lose to both of them, especially if they lose to both of them, the season it's going to be really tough to rally.
You're not making the playoffs,
right? Well, you're definitely
over in the division,
right? Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, you're definitely not winning the AFC South. There's a chance you could rally at the end of the year, and put some wins together and get in as a wild card team as the 7th seed potentially. But then it's another one and done, and then what does that really get you? I think they need to win both of those games, and if they don't, that's when the changes need to happen. Fire Ballard and Reich. Luke Diamond, Colts podcaster on Twitter, I saw him say make the switch and of course you said it earlier, make the switch to Sam Ehlinger, which I agree with. Put yourself in a position to figure out your future, because essentially you're going to be looking at your future if you go 0-2 on these next 2 games. So I think they need to win both of those games. Obviously, if they don't win both of those games, it's going to be time to just, peel it back, figure out what you have, start rebuilding this team, because it's clearly not in the position that we once thought it was.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think they're both gone by the end of the season, or at the end of the season, if not earlier. Look, yeah, there's issues with Frank Reich. His in-game decision making isn't always great, but he's one of those guys that I feel like he is struggling with the cards that he's been dealt. You can only do so much, and you used your one wild card on getting the
Carson
team to
Wentz.
buy on Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
So that doesn't help. But Chris Ballard, you're right. He's good at a talent evaluator, as anybody out there. He's a great scout. However, this whole thing with being stingy with your cap space, look, congratulations. Yeah, you got a ton of cap space, but that doesn't win you games. That doesn't win championships. I know you don't want to buy a championship. I get that. I get that you do not want to go out and spend A-level money on B-level talent. And I'm A-okay with that. There is nothing wrong with that at all. However, where he has failed this team time and time again, the article that I sent you, I cannot remember who wrote that article. I think it was Sports Illustrated.
Yeah,
actually. So. But where Chris Ballard has failed the Colts is that he has not handled the signing of players for the back end of the roster. There is zero depth. He talks about building it in the trenches, making the trenches better. The offensive line depth is awful. There is a considerable drop-off from high-level talent guys to, I mean, usually you can say, oh, there's a drop-off from the starters to the backups. But these guys that they brought in for pennies on the dollar, like Matt Pryor, look, they were worth pennies on the dollar because they, for a reason.
Right.
These guys were sitting in the Walmart dollar DVD bin for a reason. Which, by the way, you can find some really good hidden gems in that bin, which is great. If you can find those gems, if you're willing to go digging through it, you can find them. But he hasn't, and he hasn't put in the time to go out and get those types of players that can help on the back end of the roster. The example the writer used was when the Buffalo Bills drafted Josh Allen, they had an awful offensive line. They knew they didn't want to go out and just spend a ton of money with Band-Aids, but they knew they didn't want that to be a long-term solution, but they knew they needed to do something now to improve it while the back-end talent, the rookies, progressed. And they went out and they made some key signings on the offensive line of veteran players. Yeah, they may have overpaid a little bit on some of the guys, but they had a considerable increase in, their offensive line played considerably better the following season. And as those guys aged, the guys on the back end were getting better and getting more experience, getting more practice time, getting coached up. And they were able to slide right in when these other guys were either became free agents or retired, and it has turned into the Buffalo Bills having one of the better offensive lines. This is where Ballard has just he hasn't even he steps up to the plate, but he doesn't even take a swing. Or actually, I don't even think he stepped up to the plate on it, to be honest. I think he's like he keeps stepping out of the batter's box and taking practice swings.
I saw a video on TikTok of Marcus Semien, the second baseman for the Rangers, and he's just kind of chilling in the dugout, and then realizes as they're announcing his name that he was supposed to be on deck. That's what Chris Ballard is.
That's Chris Ballard. Yeah. Yeah, now you're fighting for your job, and it's like, oh well, but it is. It's when you look at your roster and you go, I'm fine with this. And you go and you're rolling out a player like Ashton Doolin at wide receiver as your number 2 or number 3 or whatever he is, wide receiver. It's concerning. You sometimes you have to spend the money. Yeah, you don't want to. We get it. You don't want to. You don't want to overpay for somebody. We all understand that. But there's such a thing as trying to make a smart signing and just not making a signing at all. And honestly, I feel like the Colts need to change at GM now because everybody in the league knows Chris Ballard is a tightwad. You know, he's not willing to shell out for the talent. He's going to come in with a low ball offer. And these agents aren't willing to play ball with that. They're like, no, we're not even going to look at the Colts because you're not going to get an offer that's worth your time. So it's time for a change because now you have that mark on you as they're too cheap. Don't even consider them. So talent goes elsewhere because of the stigma that the Colts are cheap. I mean, you've got to remember, yes, it's one thing to stick within your budgets, you know, be smart about your finances, but at the same time, these guys are also, it's their livelihoods as well, and they want to make money. And like I said, I totally agree with not oversigning for players that have bust written all over them a little bit and being hesitant, but it's another thing to completely sit out free agency pretty much altogether and wait for the bargain bin guys to come crawling to you. You can't be sustainable like that. You can't win championships like that. You got to be willing to take risks.
Yeah, and then they just absolutely don't do that, and that's what's frustrating. Because, like I said, I'm fine with it if the Colts, if like at the end of this year, you know, the Colts, let's say they end up finishing, you know, let's say they had signed OBJ. Let's say they had brought him in.
Oh, they're not, because he's put out his top 5.
Right. But let's say they had brought him in, and the Colts, like, they're on pace right now to go 8-1. Let's say that's how it goes. They miss the playoffs again. I'm fine. I mean, I'm not fine with that in the moment, but I look back on it and I'm like, okay, you know what? At least we got, you know, some talent for Matt Ryan. It didn't work out. That's fine. But when it goes bad this year, and you're like, well, of course it went bad because there's nothing. there's nothing.
You started a left tackle that nobody else wants because he can't block to save his life. Yeah. And now you're like, oh, we got some injuries, so let's move him over to right tackle and put a unproven rookie at left tackle. Oh, great. It got worse. I mean, do I think Bernard Raymond is going to eventually get there? I don't know. I hope so.
He cleaned it up after that. It was a horrendous start, but he did clean it up as the game went on.
I think he can get there, but whoever thought going into the season with Matt Pryor as your starting left tackle, look, on the offensive line, yeah, everybody says center is the cornerstone. It is. It's important. But that blind side or that left tackle, that is, if you do not have a solid left tackle, the rest of the line is working to pick up the slack from that. And I think that's why we're seeing a drop off from Quentin Nelson this year, is because he is having to work doubly hard in making up for the deficiencies at left tackle. Mm-hmm. And which is unfortunate because everybody's like, look, why'd you overpay for Quentin Nelson? Quentin Nelson's worth the money he's getting. It's just he's being put into a position right now that is unsustainable. Yeah, you're not going to perform up to your abilities because you're having to cover for somebody else. It's just like in any workplace. If you have a teammate that you work with and they're not holding up their end of the deal with the daily work, your work's going to suffer because you're trying to do the job of 2 people.
Right.
It's like any workplace. So I'm not jumping on that bandwagon of we overpaid Quentin Nelson and now look at him.
The people that hold that opinion are also the people that think Ryan Grigson was a better GM is a better GM than Chris Ballard because he took Andrew Luck, which we've covered, you know, extensively on the
Andrew
podcast.
Luck fell into his lap.
Right, exactly. We've covered that extensively on the show. That look,
I could have been the GM and just knew that taking Andrew Luck was the right decision.
And I mean, you can, and I don't even think you can make the argument, well, maybe he would have taken, you know, RG3. He could have messed it up that way. It's like, well, both are out of the league right now. So, I mean, I don't think either of them really counts as you get credit for.
Right. But to say like all Quentin Nelson does is mean mug and growl. Which is somebody said on Twitter. That's how they describe Quentin Nelson. I'm like, look, I'm not jumping on that one yet because the guy is having to make up for the deficiencies at left tackle. and he's also having to play the left guard position as well. And also I will say, I don't know, maybe because it's a little bit of the homer in me, but Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit just bashing on Danny Pinter, like, oh great, look, now Danny Pinter is at center. Look, I think Danny Pinter is actually a better center than he is a guard. And when he stepped in for Ryan Kelly last year, I was really happy with his performance. So but of course, that also might be the homer in me because Danny Pinter is a Ball State guy, and I really like seeing him succeed. But yeah, the offensive line is, I think, honestly, if the offensive line was better, if there was more investment at left tackle, or just a slight investment, there was guys out there that they could have brought in, some veteran guys that, they may be a little bit step slower, but they can't be as bad as Matt Pryor. Mm-hmm. They just can't. And that's where I feel bad for Quentin Nelson, is that he's playing hard, but he's also having to essentially play two positions at once.
It's rough. Hopefully it gets better. We're hoping it gets better, and hopefully it gets better this next weekend. We're gonna, final question of the podcast here. The Colts will beat Jacksonville this weekend, and I actually do think it is a hot take. With as much trouble as the Colts have had in Jacksonville, the Jags have had just as much trouble in Indy. Jags have lost 8 of the last 9 at Lucas Oil. The Colts have 10 days to prepare, and hopefully they'll be healthy, ready to go, and I think they get the win. So I do think it's, this is the week it kind of has to turn around, and I'm hoping, maybe it's blind faith, but I think the Colts can get it done.
I'm honestly going to say this is a cold take because, one, I don't know if Jonathan Taylor's playing this weekend.
True.
But two, with as bad as the offensive line has been, is his name Josh Allen?
Yeah.
As well?
Yeah.
Yeah. Josh Allen is going to have another heyday. He's good. Okay. Yeah. He plays for the Jaguars, but man, is he good. And I think he's going to feast, whether he lines up to the left or to the right, he's got clean pickings of Matt Ryan. And if Matt Ryan cannot hold on to the football as he's getting hit, or if these wide receivers can't get open quickly enough, and then also look, Nyheim Hines, is he still in concussion protocol? That was an ugly hit. Mm-hmm. Like, good thing the Colts did. They acted swiftly. They acted they made the right moves, took his helmet away quickly, because that could have been seriously a major PR nightmare with him standing up and, like, oh my gosh, wobbling the way he did. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be some talent that's not going to be on the field. And you're also going up against one of the better edge rushers in the league. I hope they win. I'm not confident that the offensive line is going to be able to hold up enough for the Colts to be able to move the ball consistently to beat Jacksonville. Do I think they're going to get shut out? No, I don't think they get shut out, but it's going to be a rough day.
Yeah, and then if that happens, we might see what we've talked about get put into motion finally.
If they lose this weekend, I don't see a path for them. I don't see them winning in Tennessee. That's another place they've struggled at.
Yeah,
but I mean, if they lose this weekend, that basically puts them 0-5 in the division. You're already in a bad division. The AFC is a little bit stronger this year. I mean, the AFC Central has a couple teams that could be contending for a wild card. The AFC West, obviously, we know they're strong. I'm thinking the AFC North.
Yeah,
AFC North.
AFC Central hasn't existed since 2001, but I mean, I know what you meant.
Thinking, with Cleveland.
Well, hey, I wish it was the AFC Central, because if that was the case, Tennessee wouldn't be in our division. So
yeah,
we'd be in the AFC. Of course, that means we'd be in the East with the Patriots and the Bills, and that wouldn't be fun.
Again, look, you're gonna have Miami and Buffalo that are, both going to be postseason contenders.
And aren't the Jets above 500 now?
The Jets actually look like they have a pulse.
Right.
So you go 0-5 in the division, I don't see a clear path for the Colts to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
I don't. I think if you lose these next 2 games, I think you do see a move made going into, or at least when's the bye week?
Bye week is late in the season, and that's what I was just getting ready to say, is that you kind of have, there's two kind of like exit ramps that you would like that you normally see something happen before the end of the season. Typically, it's in the bye week because you've got extra time, and it's, you know, after a Thursday night game because you have, you know, the 10 days. I understand why a move was. I know there were some people who wanted to see a move like immediately, despite what happened, you know, on Thursday. But I know why they didn't, because you literally have the two most important games of your season coming up. So if you tell your team before those two important games, like, nah, actually we're gonna stink this year, let's just phone it in and see what we have, then that's not a great message. So I see why they didn't do that. And they're like, okay, let's play these next 2 games. If we look good, we look good. If we don't, then that's when we make our changes. So,
and at the same time, I don't feel like the Colts will make an in-season change, because you always have to have somebody on that coaching staff that you can trust to take over as interim head coach. I mean, do you give it to Gus Bradley?
I think so. He coached before.
Yeah, that's true. He has, and he's coached in the division.
Yeah.
It was a head coach at Jacksonville. So, I mean, there is that, but the Colts also aren't a team to make a move like that in the middle of the season. But I feel like if there was ever a time for Irsay to do that, it is this year, because he's had those meetings in his office with Ballard and Reich where he has just lit into them last year and again this year already. I think it's a fuse that's waiting to go off, but I think if they lose these next 2 games, I could see that move happening going into that game against Washington. If not at the bye week, but by that point, it's like, why make the move then if it's so late in the season? Just hold on, get through it, and after that Monday following, you know, Black Monday, that's the Monday it all goes down typically. So you can always wait till Black Monday.
Yeah, I think that's what will happen. So we'll see. Hopefully, I mean, I don't know. I can't decide which I would rather see more, because I do want to see something happen. But I also, if we can salvage the season, I'd like to see that too. So it'll be interesting to see what the Colts are able to do.
I'm not a fan of the mid-season firing, because, like, what does it accomplish? What does it accomplish that you couldn't have waited until Black Monday for?
I mean, yes, but I think it also sends the message of, like, okay, like, because I mean, I don't know, because I guess anything can still happen. Like, I mean, because even if you lose these next 2 games, like, you're truly out of it. But maybe if you rally, you can still make a wild card spot. Like, I don't know. It's tough, because it does send I think a solid message, especially after what we've seen, that, like, people are finally getting held accountable. But at the same time, you know, you're right. I mean, you don't want to, you know, kind of send that message like, you know, before you've even reached the midpoint of the season. Then what are we playing for at that point? We've already kind of invested in, and, you know, so I don't know. I think there's a case that could be made both ways.
Yeah, I mean, because we all knew that season that, you know, the suck for luck year, we didn't make a move in the middle of the season that year. I don't think we didn't let Jim Caldwell go.
No.
At that point,
no,
we waited till the end of the season. So, like I said, I've never understood why. I mean, unless you think it's early enough in the season and this new interim coach can light a fire underneath the guys and get them going. But I've never understood it, because it's not like this interim coach is going to come in and put in a new system and it's just all of a sudden going to magically work. I don't know.
I think it does just kind of get you in the mindset. It gets the organization in the mindset of, like, okay, we can start looking now, as opposed to, you know, waiting until that person is gone so you can.
I get that.
So, yeah, there's a case to be made both ways, but we'll see. These next couple of weeks are going to be very interesting.
Hey, if things do go south, that's always when things go south with the Colts, it is kind of nice at the same time, because if you're on a budget and you actually want to go see a Colts game, tickets on the secondary market become stupid cheap, and you could get really good seats for like next to nothing, or like really affordable. The affordability goes up, so you can actually attend a Colts game. Yeah, because that year, that the suck for luck year, I think I went to 3 games and sat with really, really good seats because the price was, and at that time I was we were in college, so I was able to afford, not great, but hey, we didn't care that we were going to watch the Colts lose. We just had fun at the Colts game.
Right.
So there's a bright side to it.
Oh yeah, there is a silver lining, that's for sure. Well, that will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast. Thank you guys all for hanging in and watching us here. Remember, you can follow us at 3C Media Sports on Twitter, like us on Facebook, 3C Media. Go check out the YouTube channel and the TikTok. Over on YouTube, we're 4 subscribers away from 100 subscribers, so we're excited to get to that milestone. So go, if you're watching us right now on YouTube or you're listening to us on the podcast apps, go over, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell. Also, as far as TikTok goes, we've been experimenting with some lives. I did a live yesterday for the football pairing show. We're going to be going live as well for the high school football season, going into sectionals. So make sure you're locked in there if you want to see that. And then that content will then, if you miss it, be uploaded to YouTube. So a lot of things going on right now. And remember, you can listen to us weekly on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. You can find me also at Crash Course FM on Twitter. B. Scott, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87.
Hopefully, the Colts will get that win, but we will have to wait and see on that. But I hope everybody has a fantastic week. Thank you for listening to this week's podcast.